Ghostbusters 2.
You're the best! We're the beautiful! We're the only Ghostbusters! We're back!
Yours truly, Brevin Thompson, is back to talk about Ghostbusters 2 with Ivan Reitman back in the director's chair and most of the cast coming back. Everybody back then, back in 1989, I mean, the hype for this movie was huge. I mean, this was 1989, that was a big year for movies. I mean, right next to Batman, Lethal Weapon 2, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And this was just it was a big year in 1989 when it came to movies, especially for sequels. And when it came to Ghostbusters 2, I mean, a lot of people are really, really mixed on this one. Some people like this movie, some people hate this movie. And for what reason? Because they retread a lot of the first movie into the sequel. Because when you watch the film, you can see it's pretty much the first film, beat by beat. But a few changes. I mean, it's kind of like lazy sequel formula. You just retread everything from the first movie, but change a few things, copy paste, and then boom, you have a sequel. And a few years later, I mean, Home Alone would do the same thing. I mean, the first movie was a hit, and then when the sequel came out, it was the same thing. It was the same thing, except set in New York. Copy and paste, boom, sequel. It's kind of like the same thing for Ghostbusters 2. One thing that frustrates most Ghostbusters fans, including myself, is where the first film ended with the Ghostbusters being celebrated as heroes after they defeated Gozer, and Venkman getting with Dana. We cut to 5 years later in the sequel, and New York hates the Ghostbusters, and because they have been sued for the damages that were caused by Stay Puft, this resulted in the Ghostbusters going out of business and going their separate ways. Peter hosts a psychic TV show. Egon has gone back to being a professor and experimenting with emotions, and going so far as experimenting with emotions with kids by giving her a puppy and taking away puppies. Is just that's a kind of a funny moment, but especially when he's especially when Dana visits him in one scene, and then after she leaves, he's like, let's see what happens when we take away the puppy. That's kind of sick, but also kind of hilarious at the same time. Ray owns an occult bookstore, but also at the same time trying to relive his Ghostbusters days by dressing up in his Ghostbusters uniform for kids' birthday parties, while doing the same thing with Winston. But we never show what Winston has been doing with his life after the Ghostbusters split, because much like the first film, Winston doesn't really get to do a whole lot in this film, much like in the first film, because he really only appears about halfway through the film. I mean, we do see Winston in the beginning of the film with Ray, and then we see him again in the courtroom, but he doesn't bust the ghosts with Peter, Egon, and Ray. Because when it comes to the Ghostbusters, I would say that Winston is the one who always got the short end of the stick, which always frustrated me. It's just, give Winston something to do in this film. As for the quote-unquote changes that they made outside of everything that they retreaded from the first film and added it to this sequel, there's a few, and I mean a small few new things that they added to this sequel. For one thing, the pink slime, or the mood slime as they call it, because at one point in the movie they are investigating some type of disturbance that Dana has experienced with her baby Oscar, and because his carriage stopped in the middle of the street, so they dig a hole in the middle of the street, and that's when Ray discovers the river of slime. He gets a sample, and the slime starts attacking him, and that's of course when he accidentally knocks down a pipe, and that hits a power line, and of course that causes the blackout, and this causes the Ghostbusters to get arrested. They were in court. And right when the judge is about to sentence them, I mean, because of his angry outburst with the slime reacting to his negative emotions, This causes the slime to spontaneously combust, releasing two ghosts, which the judge had previously condemned to death. The judge receives the order, and of course, that leads to the Ghostbusters busting ghosts again. And they don't really do a whole lot of ghost busting until like 35 minutes into the film, because everything before Ray, Peter, and Egon are like capturing the Scoleri brothers, everything before this just felt like filler. And of course, we get the montage, which is basically the first movie's montage, but with a different song. Because when it comes to the main theme, we only hear it like briefly in the beginning of the movie and briefly near the end of the film. And when it comes to Bobby Brown's On Our Own, I do have a soft spot for that song, but it's no Ghostbusters by Ray Park Jr., which is one of my personal favorite songs. I should talk about the cast, because I do think, for the most part, they're great, despite the fact that they're doing the same damn thing over again like they did with the original film. Bill Murray's great, Dan Aykroyd's great, Harold Ramis is great, rest in peace. Sigourney Weaver, Rick Moranis, Ernie Hudson, Annie Potts. They're all great in this film, despite the fact that they're doing the same thing over again. They're just doing the best with what they are given. As for problems with the film, well, let's go over the big one, as Sid would say in Toy Story. The biggest problem with the film is that it doesn't really have much new to offer to the series, because 30 minutes in, like I mentioned, you get the Ghostbusters catching a ghost, we get a montage, we get Peter and Dana getting together, because right before this film even took place, Dana and Peter broke up. She had a kid, which is new to the series, but is like, it's not Peter's kid, because, she just had a kid with a random guy who was never mentioned in this film. We never see this guy. And, they get together, and we have, like, some government official. We get, like, Walter Peck 2, as I like to call him. Well, Watered Peck, as, like, some fans would like to call him. He's basically Walter Peck, except not, like, he's not Walter Peck. But he's basically the same character, in a way. Because, you have a government official who doesn't like the Ghostbusters. He gets them arrested, and the mayor fires him, and, of course, the Ghostbusters are released because they had the favor of the mayor. We get something big walking through the streets of New York, because in the first film, it was the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. And in the sequel, they used the slime to animate the Statue of Liberty, which is kind of iconic in a way, because, instead of, like, something big trying to destroy the city, like, they're using the Statue of Liberty to, like, deliver a lot of, like, positivity around New York to weaken the evil slime. And, of course, we get a showdown with the villain. And when it comes to the villain, in particular, Vigo, the build-up of it, it works, because you have a ghost living in a painting. I do think that in particular is interesting, but its execution, especially, the build-up of the confrontation between him and the Ghostbusters in the third act of the film is really disappointing, especially with how everything is handled. We get the Ghostbusters entering the Museum of Arts. They rescue Dana and Oscar, her baby, and Vigo comes out of the painting. He subdues the Ghostbusters, and he's weakened by the New Yorkers, like, singing, because it's weakening both him and the slime. And he eventually goes back in the painting while trying to possess Ray. And, of course, the Ghostbusters defeat him. Ray is back to normal, and the people love Ghostbusters again, and yay! That's the end of the movie. When it comes to Ghostbusters 2, I don't hate this film like most fans do. I've always liked parts of it when I was a kid, but as an adult, I do recognize its problems, but I do love the cast. I mean, it's still the Ghostbusters that we all know and love. And there are some sequences that you can enjoy, and you're like, despite some problems, there's like a few moments that I like about the film. But it retreads a lot from the first film, and it doesn't really have much of anything new to offer to the series because it recycles everything from the first film. But I would mostly enjoy it as a guilty pleasure because it's still fun to watch in some areas, but still, there's nothing new to offer to the series. So I'm gonna give Ghostbusters 2 a C. It's okay. So, yeah. I don't, like I said, I don't hate this film like most fans do. It's just fine. And that's it. It's just fine. So what do y'all think of Ghostbusters 2? Let me know in the comments below. And guys, thank you so much as always for watching. I'm looking forward to doing my video on Ghostbusters Afterlife pretty soon. And as always, if you want my thoughts on old or new films, of course, you know where to find me.